A question I've gotten a lot over the years is, do you know of any inexpensive lavalier microphones with XLR connectors so I can go straight into a recorder that has an XLR input or a camera with an XLR input? Let's take a look at the MAONO AU-XLR20 lavalier microphone that fits that bill. This entire episode is recorded with the AU-XLR20, which is located just here, and it is recorded into a Zoom F8 with the exception of some audio that's recorded later with the Zoom H4n. Here's a sample with the MAONO AU-XLR20 microphone into a Zoom H4n. We have our input level set to 45 out of 100. I have the lavalier placed just on my chest here in a pretty typical fashion, and we just wanted to kind of give you a sample of what it sounds like directly out of the camera. The only processing we've done on this is to loudness normalize to -23 LUFS, which is the European broadcast standard for loudness. Our peaks are hitting between -18 and -12 dB on the Zoom H4n. The reason I'm using the H4n in this case is that it's a pretty typical recorder that you would use with an inexpensive lavalier microphone, so I kind of wanted to put that combination together. This is obviously not a premium microphone, and so it's going to be for someone who's working on a tighter budget in most cases. And of course, I think the H4n kind of fits into that category as well. So here's a few moments of silence just to hear what a practical noise floor sounds like in a fairly quiet basement studio. In this case, I have sound blankets on both sides, my left and my right. Also one behind the camera. We have a blanket down on the floor here. Whoops. And this is what it sounds like. Here's an audio sample, again with the MAONO AU-XLR20 into the Zoom F8n. The F8n is supplying phantom power, so it is powering the microphone. And that's the main difference here. In terms of gain, we have applied 33 decibels of gain, so it doesn't require a whole lot. It's a pretty hot microphone. Seems pretty clean. I would say that the sound quality is not perfect, so it's not necessarily as good as you would typically get with a lot of professional grade lavalier microphones. But for $34 US, it's pretty impressive that the self noise is as good as it is from what I've seen so far, and that the output signal is actually quite strong. So let's go ahead and give you a few moments of silence just to measure that as well. One thing I'd like to talk about for just a minute, this is a condenser microphone with an omnidirectional pickup pattern or polar pattern. One of the things that's important to understand is that when you're working with very clean preamps like the Zoom F8n, it's almost always going to be the microphone that produces more self-noise than it is going to be the recorder. And another factor that's important to understand, I think, is to understand the difference between self-noise and noise that's actually in the room that the microphone is picking up because of its polar pattern. So I wouldn't say because of its polar pattern, but it's not necessarily rejecting noise that you might like it to reject. And I think that's an important distinction to make because a lot of people are talking about noise of a microphone, and you have to distinguish between those two. Self-noise is noise that's generated within the electronics. It's not sound that's actually in the room. It is noise generated by the electronics for the overall audio signal chain, whether it's the microphone or the recorder. And again, with a condenser microphone, almost always the microphone is going to produce more self-noise than a high-quality preamplifier like those in the Zoom F8n. One of the big questions that come up with these less expensive lavalier microphones is, are they going to produce a whole bunch of self-noise? That is the hiss that you get when you record with a less expensive microphone or into a recorder that just doesn't do a very good job. And that is self-noise. That's not noise that exists in the space where you're recording. Let's take a look here. We did some sample recordings in my basement studio, which has sound blankets on 3 sides of me. It is very quiet. We have things managed for the most part. We do have one fan in this light right here. Other than that, it's a very quiet place. What we found was that the noise floor, after loudness normalizing each of the audio samples up to -23 LUFS, which is the European broadcast standard for television loudness, we found that the noise floor sat at around -74 dB. And that is actually really quite good. What that means is I have headroom and I've got the ability to normalize to a much louder standard, and still the noise floor will be sitting under -60 dB, which is generally my rule of thumb for an acceptable noise floor if you're aiming for a sort of intimate sounding talking head or interview style video. Overall, the voicing of the microphone in my mind is about what you'd expect out of a fairly affordable lavalier microphone. So it's not the most amazing sounding microphone in the world. However, on the flip side, it doesn't have that super strong presence boost that you find on a lot of microphones. And so those tend to be a little bit more problematic with people that have sibilant voices, where you get a lot of that sizzling energy when they say the letter S or C. So you don't have that problem with this one, but I feel like it really needs a little bit of EQ to really shine. And you can do that in post and make it sound a little bit more like this. So that's just an example of what you can do with the microphone. Now, the headline feature is the price on this microphone is $34 US, which is an incredible price for what you're getting. Again, is it going to win awards and be considered the microphone of the year? Probably not in terms of its sound, but it does produce very little self-noise. It does have a strong output signal, so you can use it with recorders like the Zoom H4n, which is not known for providing a whole lot of gain. And so that's also going to work well for cameras that have XLR inputs. A lot of those don't have the greatest inputs either. So having a microphone with a hot signal like this tends to work really well. So those are really great features. Included, of course, is the lavalier microphone itself. Here is the head and the alligator clip. The head seems sturdy. It is large for a lavalier microphone, and I would generally only use it on the outside of clothing, as its size would make it pretty difficult to hide. It does have an omnidirectional pickup pattern, which is very common for lavalier microphones, and I think generally produces a better sound overall. One of the other nice features about this particular microphone is that it can be battery powered on its own, or you can use phantom power delivered from the camera or recorder that you're recording to. So on its own, it uses an LR44 battery, and in terms of phantom power, you can use anywhere between 7 and 52 volts, so pretty much any recorder or camera should be able to supply that. The metal clip seems sturdy, but the screw holding it in place could scratch leather belts, so you have to be kind of careful with it, and it's not terribly effective at staying in place. So I've had to use kind of alternative strategies to keep it from coming off. There, of course, is this very large XLR connector. Could that be problematic? It's not generally for me, but if you do need something that fits into a very small bag, it could be potentially problematic. A little bit bigger than the typical XLR connector. The cable is really long, 6 meters or almost 20 feet. That's good, so you don't have to use an extension cable in most cases. It's a little bit of work to manage this cable, but it can be done, and it does include the Velcro that makes it easy to wrap the cable. Another thing to watch for is how good are microphones at rejecting RF interference. And sometimes you can get that from phones, you can get it from other sources as well, but in the recordings I've done so far, I haven't noticed any RF interference, so it seems to be doing okay on that front. So overall summary, what do I think of this microphone? I think for $34, it's hard to beat. Not only does it have a good hot output signal, which is going to work with almost all cameras and audio recorders, even lower grade audio recorders like a Zoom H4n, but also it doesn't produce a lot of self-noise, so you're getting a nice clean signal. Now, it's not the most perfect sound or voicing, so you may want to do a little bit of EQ, and you can do something like this with an EQ plugin in post if you want to kind of sweeten the sound a little bit. This is generally not the type of lavalier microphone I would try to conceal under clothing because it is so large, so it's probably not ideal for those circumstances, but if that profile fits you, this could be a good option. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that, and we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you soon.